Coming up at 4 o'clock this afternoon, stick around for Florida Matters, live and local next. You're listening to WUSF 89.7 Tampa.
The Central Park Performing Arts Center in Largo presents a true luminary of American music, Grammy-nominated Susie Boggess, this Friday evening. She's had multiple top 10 hits and continues to tour in America and internationally. Tickets at largoarts.com.
We're starting to see more AI data centers in Florida. We may even see some here in Tampa Bay pretty soon. They use a lot of resources like power and water. I'm Matthew Petty, and today on Florida Matters, live and local, we're looking at what it takes to run a data center and the damage it can do. How do you feel about a data center in your neighborhood? Passing it on the way to work or picking up your kids from school? Do you think we need more regulations for these data centers? Call us. 813-755-6562 is the number to join the conversation. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. Also, find out what's going on with Florida law enforcement and its cooperation with ICE. And later, hockey is really having a moment. The USF men's hockey team is in St. Louis for the national championship. All this, plus your calls and emails after these headlines.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen is seeking U.S. Senate confirmation to become the next Secretary of Homeland Security. He first needs to secure the recommendation of the Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee. The panel's chairman is Rand Paul. The Republican and Mullen have had beef in the past. Paul reaffirmed that today in questioning whether Mullen has the temperament to lead the DHS.
You told the media that I was a freaking snake and that you completely understood why I had been assaulted. I was shocked that you would justify and celebrate this violent assault that caused me so much pain and my family so much pain. I just wonder if someone who applauds violence against their political opponents is the right person to lead an agency that has struggled to accept limits to the proper use of force.
If confirmed, Mullen would replace Kristi Noem, who was fired by President Trump following criticism of a more than $200 million ad campaign in which Noem was featured. However, Noem's tenure was also overshadowed by widespread criticism of the DHS's immigration enforcement tactics, including confrontations that led to the killings of 2 U.S. citizens in Minneapolis. Israel says it has killed another high-ranking Iranian leader. It is the latest in Israeli airstrikes targeting the country's top officials. Iran's president confirmed the killing overnight of its top intelligence minister on social media. Separately, thousands of mourners gathered in Tehran for a mass funeral of the heads of Iran's National Security Council and the powerful Basij paramilitary police. Here's NPR's Carrie Kahn.
Defense Minister Israel Katz says Iran's intelligence minister, Esmail Khatib, was responsible for, quote, the regime's apparatus of repression and assassination and instrumental in the deadly crackdown on Iranian demonstrators earlier this year. Katz says the war is in a decisive phase and that, quote, no one in Iran has immunity. Everyone is a target. Meanwhile, mourners packed a huge Tehran square for the funerals of 2 leaders also killed by Israel. Live stream of the massive crowd carrying multiple coffins was broadcast on Iranian TV. Carrie Kahn, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says he's worried the more weapons the United States uses to fight its war against Iran, the fewer missiles available to help Ukraine defeat Russia. Zelensky tells the BBC Russian President Vladimir Putin wants a, quote, long war in the Middle East because he says it would mean higher energy prices, the depletion of U.S. reserves, and a depletion of resources in Ukraine. U.S. stocks are trading lower this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average down 470 points, or roughly 1%. This is NPR News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Progressive Insurance, working to help protect small businesses and the owners that run them, offering customizable coverages to salons, accounting firms, tradespeople, and more. Learn more at progressivecommercial.com.
You're listening to WUSF 89.7. I'm Craig Kopp. Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd is standing by comments he made Monday about immigration enforcement. As WUSF's Nancy Guan reports, he's continuing to ask for a pathway for immigrants who have not committed crimes.
Judd says a majority of people his officers encounter without legal status have a criminal background. But he says there are also those who don't, and they deserve a path forward.
We deal with the local issues at eye level, face to face, and our decision makers in Tallahassee and Washington don't have that opportunity.
Judd is known for being tough on immigration and represents a majority Republican county, but he denies his views have changed.
This is not some epiphany from above all of a sudden. This is common sense of what's happening here.
Judd adds he fully supports federal immigration agents. He says it's U.S. Congress's responsibility to fix the immigration system. Nancy Guan, WUSF 89.7 News.
Florida Attorney General James Othmeyer threatened to have Tampa Mayor Jane Castor removed from office over the city police department's immigration sanctuary policies. But Castor revised those policies on Monday to be more in line with state law. On Tuesday, Othmeyer said the incident should serve as a reminder.
Local officials don't have a choice. We are not going to have sanctuary cities, sanctuary jurisdictions. We are going to enforce the law.
Reporters also asked Othmeyer about Grady Judd. Othmeyer said he would not support a letter to Congress asking for a way for immigrants who are not criminals to be able to stay in the country legally. However, he did praise Judd for his department's previous immigration enforcement actions. Look for sunny skies today and comfortable temperatures. We'll have a high of 70 degrees. I'm Craig Kopp, WUSF 89.7 News.
On the Bay Blend podcast, we highlight things to do in the Tampa Bay area you might not even know about, like when I went to Rustic Steel Academy to try my talents at welding.
Do you think I have a future as a welder if I wanted to change career paths?
I think I would not quit your day job yet.
Well, at least he was honest. On the Bay Blend podcast, we give you the news and some fun in your own community. That's the Bay Blend from WUSF, wherever you listen to your podcasts or online at WUSF.org.
This is Florida Matters Live and Local, sponsored by Badawi Law and broadcasting from the Doctors Lorraine Rubis and Neil Frankel studio at WUSF in Tampa. I'm Matthew Petty. Florida already has data centers, but plans for a hyperscale data center in Polk County are causing a stir in the community of Fort Meade. Hyperscale data centers use lots of energy. They also require a lot of water to cool computer systems, and there's a question of pollution from noise and toxic forever chemicals. Now, if you've got concerns about data centers in general, or maybe the Fort Meade one specifically, we'd love to hear from you. 813-755-6562 is the number. Maybe you can see the other side of the equation, getting in on the AI boom and the economic benefits. 813-755-6562 is the number to join the conversation. You can also email FloridaMatters@WSF.org. And with us to explain more is WSF's Jessica Mazzaros. She's been covering these proposals since the start, and she joins us now to talk more about the impact of AI data centers on Florida. Jessica, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. Glad to be here.
So let's just start with, what is a data center? Why do we need them?
Yeah, so you mentioned we've had traditional data centers. Those have existed for a really long time. It could be like a floor in an office building or in a warehouse. But what we're talking about here with hyperscale data centers is, at least the proposals I'm seeing in Florida, could be at least 1,000 acres of a facility.
Wow, that's big.
Very big, massive computing facility, and they're designed to handle the growing demands for artificial intelligence and cloud providers, cryptocurrency. I mean, everything is becoming more and more AI, right? So this is really to help to fast stream that. And they have thousands of servers. As you mentioned earlier, it requires a lot of energy to power those servers, and they're on all the time.
Yeah.
So a hyperscale data center needs access to about 1 gigawatt of electricity at any given moment to function. And so you can understand how much what that means is it can power hundreds of thousands of homes.
Wow.
And they need access to that amount of energy all the time.
That is a lot of power. Now, you talked with Christina Reichert. She's a senior attorney with Earth Justice, and she talked about some of the risks associated with these centers. What was sticking out for her?
Well, not only the amount of energy, right? That's the big one, is the amount of energy, but then the amount of water that is needed to cool these systems down. Because if these systems are constantly running, using all this energy, it creates a lot of heat. And so there's two different types of cooling systems, and there's concerns with both, of course. So there's one that is called a closed loop system, and there's an evaporative cooling system. So the closed loop, which really, that's the one that conserves more water because it's using the same amount of water over and over again.
So it just has water that pumps through
right
in a cycle.
The concern with that is that there might be forever chemicals being used with that kind of a system. And then there's the evaporative system, which basically uses endless amounts of water. One proposal I saw could be 5 million gallons a day.
Wow.
In just for one facility.
So they're just pumping water onto this hot stuff and it's evaporating.
It evaporates and
it.
it's gone. Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. We're talking about the proposal for data centers in Florida, specifically in Fort Meade, what the community thinks. Want to hear from you as well. Would you welcome a data center in your community? Could it be a boon for the economy? Maybe you're concerned about the environmental and health impacts. The number is 813-755-6562 to get in on the conversation. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. I mean, Jessica, every time you look at your phone, it's basically there's a little AI kind of thing that pops up to steer your search, right?
Mm-hmm.
AI is just everywhere. It's all around. It's kind of inescapable. So there is definitely like a need for more of these centers to kind of power the AI we use every day.
Right. I mean, I think it's just growing and growing. Or I don't know if you've noticed, like now instead of a Google search with a bunch of links, it's an AI summary. Or if you're using a transcription service, it's a summary of your transcription. AI is everywhere, and whether you asked for it or not, it's there. And it just seems that's where we're going. And so there is a high demand, and there seems to be a need based on the way that technology is growing and evolving.
Yeah, a lot of hunger for that, for the power and those data centers are needed to power it. So let's talk about the proposal for Fort Meade. What exactly was it or is it?
Yeah, that's a great question, because the developer Stonebridge seems to have changed up the proposal just before the last commission meeting. It seems that way. I don't know. There's a lot of confusion around this particular proposal, but initially it was a 1,300-acre site near U.S. Highway 17 and Broadway, and that's in Fort Meade in Polk County. And they were suggesting an evaporative cooling system like we talked about, and they were the ones that said, up to 5 million gallons of water per day. Last week at the commission meeting, it seems they're working with an 1,100-acre site and they want to use a closed loop system. Residents are were sharing that they were skeptical about the changes and the fact that Stonebridge has never actually built anything like this before. They are developers, but have never developed a hyperscale data center. Also, Stonebridge doesn't know who they're building this for yet. They haven't. I don't know if they do know or they're not disclosing it, but they haven't said who this is for, basically.
I mean, could it be this may be a little bit off base, but could it be a kind of a speculative data center? We build it and then somebody's going to come along and use it?
It could be. I mean, there is a high demand. And if you have some capital and you want to get in on this this boom of AI data centers, I mean, why not build it and then see who shows up? Maybe, because you've built it for them and it's kind of a unique thing. Because we so far don't have one in Florida yet. There's a lot of proposals for these hyperscale data centers, but we don't have one yet. It'll be interesting to see who will be first.
Well, let's hear from Riley Grant. This is one of the people who was protesting the proposed development of this hyperscale development in Fort Meade.
I will want to move, and I emailed the mayor and I tried to say, like, if this gets put through, I'm moving. I'm out. I'm sure a lot of people my age will follow suit because I know a lot of people who want to start their families or have started their families, and they don't want to start it next to a data center.
All right, so talk about some of the reasons you heard from folks about why they're worried specifically about this idea of a hyperscale data center going in near them.
Yeah, Riley Grant was one of about a dozen people protesting outside of the commission meeting last week. And Riley had said that for her specifically, she had done some research, and what she found, she didn't like the health impacts. And I don't know if this is true or not, but just for her, she's concerned about, miscarriages happening like around data centers or environmental impacts of, what is there pollution in the water, air quality.
Is there some data to back up some of these concerns?
I haven't found that myself. myself, but I know that there are health impacts related to at least the noise. And there's a lot of people who are really upset about the noise, and even low frequencies can impact your cardiovascular system, your stress levels. Another woman who I spoke to who was protesting on the side of the road was saying that she's would move as well with her, take her family, and she's lived there 15 years, and she would leave because she has respiratory issues and she would be worried about air quality.
Talking about the proposal for a hyperscale data center in Fort Meade. I want to hear what you think, hearing some of what Jessica Mazzaris has been reporting on the community pushback there, but would you welcome a data center in your community? Do you have some concerns about it? The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. On the flip side of that, there's some economic impact that comes along with it, right? So what are some of the pros of a hyperscale data center?
Yeah, so the benefits being touted right now on the local level that we're seeing are job creation. The more short term would be constructing this facility. And then the long term would be the more technical operating jobs. Then there's, of course, an increase in tax revenue. And depending on the deal that these developers create with local governments, there could be some significant financial transactions. So like, for instance, Stonebridge is offering $10 million to Fort Meade in signing this agreement. And they're saying that they would break that up into 2 payments. But then there was also some questions from residents of when would we see that money? And the commissioners did not know. Yeah.
So what's actually happened with this proposal to date? It sounds like it's kind of been pushed down the road a wee bit.
Initially, last week on the 12th, the commissioners were getting prepared to vote as a resolution on a 20-year agreement with Stonebridge on this facility. But I guess with some of the pushback leading up and then the protest right before the meeting, as soon as the meeting began, commissioners decided that they were going to change it to technically become an ordinance, which means that then it's going to get kicked to the planning department, and the planning department will hold a public hearing, and it kind of becomes a more formal process where residents have more say, and they have that public hearing, and then it will be kicked back to commissioners for a vote. So that's where it's at right now. Commissioners also at that meeting fired their city attorney, and
that's not a good sign.
No, and they hired a new team, TG Law, on the spot, and I think, and they're hoping that these lawyers will help them with this agreement moving forward.
Does that sort of tell you something about the level of planning and preparation that needs to go into a city planning to have one of these? It sounds like they're playing catch up a wee bit.
Yeah, and I think that's the trouble that local governments are having right now, because there are regulatory systems in place for, let's say, a zoning issue. If you want to zone something like this that would be considered industrial, or if you want a tax break, which is what happened with Fort Meade. They were Stonebridge was given a tax break and a zoning change last year, and now they're leading up to this agreement. But I think that there haven't been, up to this point, regulations surrounding data centers. And now we're seeing, at the state level, the legislature just passed such regulations right now. And at the federal level, they're trying to do that as well. So everyone's kind of playing catch up while these proposals are just kind of dispersed all across Florida.
In the last 30 seconds or so we have here, Jessica, what would be the most successful outcome from the perspective of people you talk to who have some concerns about this particular proposal in Fort Meade and Polk County?
Well, I think from the people I spoke to and heard from, and I mean, it was an hours-long meeting, they do not want this to be there. And if it's there, there were threats of, we're going to vote you out, we're moving. And there was a lot of that for hours, a lot of that conversation. But mostly they said, hey, go out to a data center. They told commissioners, like, if you really want this, a couple people said, go check out, use our funds, go to a data center, check it out, and ask the local residents how are they being impacted and what does it really look like on the ground. Right.
So they want to see some more research before they sign on the dotted line there. We've been talking with WUSF's Jessica Mazzaris about her ongoing coverage of AI hyper data centers in Florida. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
Coming up next, we'll continue our conversation about AI and how that fits into this conversation, or the pushback around hyperscale data centers. That's when Florida Matters Live and Local continues. Stay with us.
Listener support powers WUSF. Funding also comes from Seitenbacher, with a new web shop. Healthy muesli, cold-pressed oils, and vegetable broth mix delivered to your door from right here in Tampa Bay. Details at Seitenbacher.com. Seitenbacher. Seitenbacher.
Turn your old car into powerful local journalism and programming you love on WUSF. When you donate it, we'll handle the pickup for free, and you'll get a tax deduction. And best of all, you'll fuel the news coverage and local shows that keep our community informed and connected. Call 866-WUSF-CAR or visit WUSF.org.
A family-owned Latino grocery store hosts live concerts in their produce section. The joy of a supermarket concert while you shop. That's next time on Here and Now.
Coming up at 1 after Florida Matters Live and Local.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. Well, we've been talking about this proposal for a hyperscale data center in Polk County. A bit of pushback there, but we know that data centers in general require quite a bit of water and electricity. The bigger scale ones needed for AI use electricity that could power hundreds of thousands of homes, but they also require a lot of data, and it's causing a data storage shortage for small things like laptops and phones. Here to talk more about how this all fits together is Alex Mahadavan. He's the Director of MediaWise at Poynter Institute in St. Petersburg. Alex, thanks for being with us.
Really great to be here.
Okay, so just talk about that kind of storage shortage or the capacity shortage right now. What exactly does that mean?
Well, as you know, Jessica said in the previous segment, AI has been inserted into basically every aspect of our online experience. So you are using AI all the time. Mm-hmm. While at the same time, you're seeing people streaming more Netflix, using cloud services much more than they ever had before. So you have this just increasing pressure on the infrastructure that is needed to power our digital lives right now. And AI is obviously the big driver of that. And so there's just not the capacity to meet the demand right now. And that's why you have, all of these people coming in and trying to build these data centers.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting too. I mean, thinking about the cloud, like on the one hand, it sounds like something just sort of out there in the ether, but it does require a lot of infrastructure, right?
It does. Yeah. I mean, we've been hearing about the cloud forever, and when I saw my first data center, I was really surprised by the size of it. But then I thought back to, well, all the stuff that's on my phone that goes into the cloud. Well, where the heck does it go? Now residents in neighborhoods are starting to see where it's going, and it's popping up in their backyards.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So walk us through how that data storage works to the best of your understanding.
Well, what happens is, so let's say I, take a bunch of photos on my phone. It backs up to iCloud. Basically, that is stored remotely in one of these data centers. So that's specific to cloud infrastructure. Mm-hmm. The way AI works is I open ChatGPT or Claude or whatever, and I do a couple of things. I ask it a few questions, and what it does is it searches the web. So that's putting some pressure on that cloud infrastructure, and then it's also doing something called inference, where it is trying to predict what I want, and that is putting pressure more so on these data centers, because there are all these little computations that have to happen, and they're happening on computers in these massive buildings. So every question that you are sending to ChatGPT, it's triggering a little math problem that's happening and a prediction model, and it's happening somewhere, and it's happening in these data centers.
Mm-hmm. How does it, differ from the storage needed for our personal tech devices like, computers, gaming systems, and phones? Like, can you kind of break down the difference there?
Yeah, so it is a lot more when it comes to AI, the infrastructure, the cloud infrastructure needed. And that's because it does inference, which is what I just mentioned before. It mm-hmm. wants to, ChatGPT has to answer my questions, but then they also have to train these models. And it is very time consuming. It is very expensive. It takes GPUs that are more powerful than I could ever imagine. These are, processing units, computers that are essentially taking the wealth of human knowledge and trying to train the chatbots that people are using every day. So there's pressure there because these companies are constantly trying to put out new models. There is this race for AGI, artificial general intelligence. When the computers will be smarter than us. So you've got pressure from all angles on building the data centers that will house the computers that do all of this work for us.
Mm-hmm. All right, this may be a dumb question, but you also read about companies that are employing humans to help train these models. Is that like a shortcut? Does that mean you don't have to use all this computing power to train these kind of these engines?
That's on such a small scale. And they were using, humans. I mean, they were the same type of people that were being hired to moderate like awful Facebook videos that were coming out for trust and safety. Those same type of people were being asked to monitor and evaluate the answers that these chatbots were giving. But that's just on such a small scale. That's reinforced learning, really, where the crux is all of the computations that are happening on these computers and chips.
Mm-hmm. If you're just joining us, we're talking with Alex Mahadavan. He's the director of MediaWise at the Poynter Institute, talking about the data storage needed for AI. If you've got questions about data storage and AI, maybe some concerns about it, maybe you're leaning into this brave new world, give us a call, 813-755-6562, or email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. So if chip-making companies are kind of putting all their resources towards data storage for AI, what does that mean for the humble user? How do we get the storage for things we need?
That is a really good question. So right now there is a massive backlog of Mac Minis, and so people have started buying Mac Minis, which is essentially like this little tiny computer to run their little AI agents on. So everyone, not only are these companies trying to get compute so they can run these models, but now tons of people are trying to buy their own little storage devices, and they are on backlog. So like there is the chips that are required to, run cars. There is competition amongst the chip makers for, from the AI companies. So I think that the demand for the infrastructure to run AI has really put pressure on sort of like every aspect of tech production right now. But the Mac Mini story is kind of funny to me because now we're all trying to create our own little data centers, I guess.
Do you have one?
I do not. I was talking to my CFO about seeing if I could get one, and so fingers crossed, I guess.
So I mean, what does having one of those just mean? You like it kind of makes the stuff you're doing faster? How does that work?
Well, it's I don't want to get too deep into it, but essentially you can set up your own little AI assistant that is running all the time. So I can, tell Claude Code, my little Claude AI assistant, hey, I need you to build this really cool messaging platform that just my brothers and I can use. Then I go to sleep and my Mac Mini runs all night and it creates it. So
are there other computers kind of like a Mac Mini, or that just happens to be the best thing people have available off the shelf these days? Or it sounds like not on the shelf at the moment because they're so popular.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the go-to right now. But I mean, you can run them off of, I have like a little tiny Raspberry Pi, which is like a little kind of tiny mini computer. It just looks like a green like house for chips sitting on my desk right now. So there are a lot of workarounds where people are trying to again, like I keep saying, they're building their own little tiny data centers to run their digital lives.
In the last kind of 20 seconds or so here, Alex, I mean, are we going to run out of data storage at some point, or is it just a infinite curve we're on?
I don't know. What I will say is there is a constant quest to make these data centers more efficient and smaller. We're obviously not there yet. They are a huge burden on the environment. So I think it will depend on how efficient they can make data centers, how efficient they can make running these models. I don't see running out of chips or whatever on the horizon because they've created this sort of demand for it. So it'll depend upon the innovation around the infrastructure.
Alex Mahadavan, Director of MediaWise at Poynter, thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Always great talking to you.
Well, coming up, Florida police departments have agreements to cooperate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, including here in Tampa. We'll talk about what that means for your community next on Florida Matters Live and Local. Stay with us.
Funding for WUSF comes from listeners like you, and also Badawi Law, offering legal services in personal injury, immigration, and auto accidents, with offices in Tampa, Florida. Office information and practice details at badawilaw.com, or learn more on Instagram at Badawi Law.
Tickets are on sale for WUSF's Longest Table. You'll enjoy food and wine pairings in downtown St. Pete with an after-party at the St. Petersburg Museum of History, Wednesday, April 8th. Get tickets at WUSFLongestTable.org. The Longest Table is sponsored in part by the Foundation for Creativity and Dispute Resolution.
Hi, I'm Mark Schreiner. In addition to serving as WUSF's Assistant News Director, I'm also our Intern Coordinator. It's a tremendous honor to get to teach young, aspiring journalists and help them on the first steps of what will hopefully be long, successful careers. Keep listening to WUSF and supporting the next generation of journalism.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. It's been a tale of two Floridas in some ways this week when it comes to Florida law enforcement's cooperation with Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE. Tampa's police department revised its police to work closer with federal immigration and customs enforcement after Florida's Attorney General, James Othmeyer, threatened to remove the mayor for, quote, forcing sanctuary policies. And just yesterday, Polk County Sheriff Grady Judd said state and national leaders might have it wrong when it comes to detaining and deporting people here illegally.
We deal with the local issues at eye level, face to face, and our decision makers in Tallahassee and Washington don't have that opportunity.
Well, Sheriff Judd said he still supports and endorses ICE, but he feels immigrants wouldn't be deported if they learned English and didn't commit crimes and integrated into society. I want to hear from you. Are you wondering what's going on with Florida law enforcement and its cooperation with ICE? Do you think Sheriff Grady Judd deserves the same response that Tampa's mayor, Jane Castor, got from the state? Join the conversation. The number is 813-755-6562. That's 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters@WUSF.org. We're here to help make sense of it all. We're joined by Arturo Rios. He's an immigration lawyer and an adjunct Stetson law professor. Arturo, thank you so much for being with us.
No, it's a great pleasure, of course.
And also with us is Mitch Perry, politics and government reporter with the Florida Phoenix. Mitch, thank you as well.
Great to be here.
And Brandon Barclay, president of the Tampa Police Benevolent Association. Brandon, thank you, sir, as well.
Thank you.
Okay, Mitch, just kind of break it down for us this week, starting with Grady Judd's two press conferences. What was going on there?
Yeah, that was interesting. That's part of a group of law enforcement officials that were part of an immigration bill that was passed last year by the Florida legislature, signed by Governor Ron DeSantis, to review immigration cases in Florida. And it really startled a lot of people that Sheriff Grady Judd, as well as Bob Pottieri from Pinellas County, who was part of that group, talked on Monday about the fact that I think that the key phrase that Grady Judd said both Monday and then yesterday in a press conference was not every size fits here when it comes to mass deportations, right? Which is, of course, what we've been basically seeing from the Trump administration since they came into power, over a year ago. And that was considered surprising because they really haven't spoken out. Florida, by state law, all 67 counties, sheriff's departments are working with ICE to enforce immigration laws here. Most of our cities are as well. They're not forced to do that. So that was just simply something really interesting to hear. By the way, I'm curious to hear what Ron DeSantis has to say about it. He hasn't been at a press event since then. Attorney General James Othmeyer was asked about yesterday. He says, "Hey, we're gonna comply with the law. We're going after these folks, working very closely with President Trump on this effort."
Yeah. Okay. And let's just kind of wind back the clock a couple of days. Tampa Mayor Jane Castor kind of in the spotlight there with the Attorney General. How did that situation get resolved?
Well, it did get resolved, right? So we know last week, Attorney General Othmeyer, as he's done with other local officials around the state in the last year, when he perceives them as acting in a way that is not fully compliance with what the state is doing in terms of cracking down on immigration, working with with ICE and federal authorities. So we sent Mayor Castor a letter saying basically, as you mentioned, stop these quote unquote forcing these sanctuary policies on your police department. So Jane Castor responded immediately. Of course, Jane Castor, former police chief herself here in Tampa of 2009 through 2015. And then the city came back on Monday, announced that they had come up with, changed some of the policies that they already had in place, and then looked at basically state language that passed last year about how to interact with undocumented folks.
Yeah. Brandon, let me bring you into this conversation. What's been the response that you've heard from your compatriots in law enforcement about what's been happening in Tampa, and from Sheriff Judd? What's your take on all this?
Yeah, I think this is much to do about nothing on the actual policy. The policy doesn't change our day-to-day interaction. What was happening was there was some very specific language. I'm looking at the policy here in front of me. There was some very specific language in there that the state attorney general had a problem with, and it was restrictions on immigration enforcement, prohibited officers from engaging in broad-based immigration enforcement. And then he gave a couple of examples. I think the problem with that was it ran afoul of what the federal government agreed to when you sign these documents. And I said to every news reporter that called, rightfully so, as Mitch pointed out, Jane Castor was the former police chief. Obviously, she's going to comply with any federal or state law, and that's immediately what she did. She went back to the policy, she looked at it, she said, hey, this is where it's problematic, let's match it up exactly, and they literally printed the Florida statute in the new policy under two different sections. I think law enforcement is not really unified as a whole on how to solve this problem. Everybody has their own opinion on what you could do and what you should do. The sheriffs obviously have a right to say what they want to say about it. But I would hope that we could clear this all up and eventually come to one point where everybody could agree this is what we're going to do moving forward.
Right. And to the point about, law enforcement having different opinions, I think I heard Grady Judd say it's up to Congress to solve the bigger problem here, or find a solution to the challenge of immigration. But I'm wondering, has it made any difference to how Tampa police officers go about their business? Like the policy before, the change that Mayor Castor has made, does that change anything at all in the day-to-day that police officers have been, has it been difficult to kind of thread that needle for Tampa police?
No, so let me clear something up. There's no uniform patrol officer that's dealing with this. If you call 911, Mitch is getting the same service that Brandon's getting, is getting the same service that Arturo's getting. I think people think that we have like an immigration squad that's running around answering calls for service and going out and snatching people up. I can assure you without a doubt that's not happening. The people that we have that have another full-time job are also tasked with the immigration stuff. And by tasked, I mean, it's mostly paperwork stuff. To my knowledge, and I'll double check with my people, I don't believe that immigration has actually done any operations in Tampa or required their services. So this is mostly DIOs, which are the officers that just file paperwork on people that get arrested, go to jail. It's more of a process. Everybody's going to be treated equally across the board, regardless of what your immigration status is, regardless if you're a victim, if you're a suspect. In the city of Tampa, we're going to treat everybody equally, and I think that's what the mayor came out and changed the policy so we could all come out in a unified front and state that.
Arturo, as an attorney for families navigating some of this kind of complex, the complex waters of immigration here, and as a legal scholar, what are you thinking about all of this when you hear Florida's Attorney General threatening to remove Tampa's mayor for the police department's level of cooperation with ICE, and then hearing those comments from Sheriff Judd?
Well, the comments from Sheriff Judd were very surprising, I think, to everybody that heard them, because he's generally not been, immigrants' best friend. But I think it's also a reflection of where we're coming to, not only in Florida, but in the country with the immigration problems we face. And I have to agree with him completely. Congress has to come up with a way to resolve these issues. And combat or fix the problem. But with regards to this specific issue here in Tampa, I think Brandon just explained it perfectly well. First of all, when Brandon said that it was probably much ado about nothing, it really was. I mean, here, I don't think that the mayor was refusing to follow the law. I really don't. I think it was more about how police were going to prioritize public safety and to make sure that there was trust between police and the community because there's a problem when victims are afraid to call police and when victims are afraid to speak to the police, the criminals win. I mean, it's as simple as that. So I think it was a bit of a political overreach, and I'm not saying that in any sort of a political slant. It's just the reality. That was probably going to make Tampa less safe. I think that the mayor's revisions are fine, but as Brandon was explaining, I mean, Tampa does have a 287G agreement with the government, and it always has at the jail level, which is, I think, where it's important. And what do I mean by that for for your listeners that don't understand? 287G is an agreement between local police agencies, be it sheriffs or police departments, and the federal government, where if somebody that is undocumented or that has a green card, because we can't forget that people with green cards can also get into trouble and get deported.
Sure.
That show up at a jail or that are arrested by law enforcement, that arrest and that person's going to be that information is going to go to ICE. Well, Tampa has always had that. And that's what Brandon was talking about, where there is a task force, but that's tasked with providing ICE and the federal government with that information. And that's always been in place. But I think that the mayor and the Tampa police were very correct in saying, yes, but we have to be very careful also that there's not a misconception between agreeing to send the information to ICE, which if you think about it, even as an immigration defense attorney, I have to agree with it. If somebody gets in trouble locally with law enforcement, and they're here unlawfully, or even if they're here with a green card, well, if they get in trouble, maybe ICE needs to look at it, and then they'll determine how dire the situation is. But I think the problem was with that factor of how much trust is the immigrant community going to have with the police to report crimes, because again, when they don't, the criminals win.
Yeah, we're talking with Florida Florida law enforcement and their level of cooperation with ICE. With us, immigration law professor and practitioner Arturo Rios, political reporter Mitch Perry of Florida Phoenix, and Brandon Barclay, president of the Tampa Police Benevolent Association. I want to hear from you too. If you've got some thoughts about this, give us a call, 813-755-6562. Hearing from Sheriff Grady Judd in the last couple of days as well. Do you think he has a point? Should energy be spent fixing America's immigration system rather than on locking up people who don't have criminal records? The number is 813-755-6562. You can email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org as well. Just real quick, Arturo, I mean, are you hearing from some of your clients? Are they concerned because of what we're hearing from the mayor of Tampa, for example, in the last couple of days?
Yes. I mean, it's very sad. It's also scary because, for example, when we have quite a few clients that sadly are the victims of domestic violence, just to use an example. I mean, there's other categories I could talk about, but let's, for the sake of time, just talk about victims of domestic violence that may be here unlawfully and they're being victimized, they're being abused, but now all of a sudden they're afraid to call the police because instead of the abuser getting into trouble as they should, they're the ones that they're afraid that they'll get detained by immigration for reporting the abuse. And then they're the ones that wind up being deported or being detained by ICE. And that's really a concern,
right?
Because again, we want to make sure that public safety is maintained. And if you have somebody that's a violent individual out there, not just in the domestic sense, because it could carry over to anywhere else. Well, that's a threat to public safety,
right?
And we want that person. That person should be the target of an investigation by the police. But again, if the victim's afraid to call in and protect themselves, also, that's a huge problem. And we're also fomenting a huge problem. And again, it's just sticking with the domestic violence aspect. Of people that could get hurt. I mean, as the violence escalates.
Yeah, so it's public
safety.
So,
yeah, there's definitely fear from our clients. There's definitely a lot of fear out there.
Yeah, just real quick, Brandon, I mean, does it make police officers' job harder, do you think?
Again, not to take anything away from Arturo, I believe that there is a fear that he is speaking of. I think it's unnecessary because I can assure you There's no Tampa police officer showing up to a residence and calling immigration. One, we don't even ask. So unless somehow we know that they're here illegally, it's not even a question that's asked. But if there is a domestic violence victim, our goal is to get the defendant locked up and prosecuted, and the state attorney's office wants that as well. So if you take away the only victim, then that can prosecute that person, then it's a disservice to everybody, to the whole system. So I just want to again reiterate, there should be no victim that should be afraid to call 911, because regardless of what their immigration status is.
Oh, and just to clarify, I agree with Brandon. I wasn't saying that the police aren't doing their job. To the contrary, it's just the perception of the immigrant community, of the fear that they feel. Not that the police are doing anything untoward. To the contrary, I know for a fact that they're not. So I just want to clarify that it's just the perception that the immigrants have, not the reality of how police would act to protect them, because I know they are.
And that's all I wanted to clear up was I understand that perception. I mean, I worked for years in West Tampa, which has a high immigrant population. So I've worked West Tampa for years. I know exactly what their problems are in that community. I just want them to be alleviated, that we're not contacting ICE because they've called us as a victim.
We're going to have to leave the conversation there, but I want to thank our guest very much, Brandon Barkley, President of the Tampa Police Benevolent Association, Mitch Perry with the Florida Phoenix, and Arturo Rios, immigration law professor and practitioner. Thank you all.
It was a pleasure, of course.
Thank you.
Well, in just a few minutes, USF men's hockey heats up the ice. You're listening to Florida Matters Live and Local. Talk a little bit about some collegiate sports in a moment when we return.
Hunger may be right next door. Nearly 220,000 people in your community struggle to afford food. You can join All Faiths Food Bank to end hunger in Sarasota and DeSoto counties. Learn more at allfaithsfoodbank.org.
I'm Scott Tong. March Madness is here. Players pushed to their limits by coaches. An NPR investigation finds athletes who say they were pushed too far.
She would call us idiots, stupid, worthless.
Had you ever had coaches use that kind of language before?
No, never.
Mental abuse in college sports. Next time, Here and Now.
Coming up at 1 after Florida Matters Live and Local.
Picky eaters, Dubai chocolate, and AI-powered food trends? Oh my! This week on the Zest Podcast, get a preview of the 4th International Flavor Summit in Orlando. New episodes of The Zest are released on Thursdays. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
WUSF brings you the voices of people who struggle to find housing they can afford in the Tampa Bay area. We found part of the problem is due to large corporations buying up single-family homes.
Wow, there's not a single thing in that whole area for under $250 where I was looking, and that was only 2 years ago.
When you make a financial contribution to WUSF, you are supporting stories that bring you firsthand accounts of what it's like to live paycheck to paycheck.
Welcome back to Florida Matters Live and Local. I'm Matthew Petty. The USF men's ice hockey team skated their way into a national championship.
Tony to Dietz, he shoots it! Another body block! Another shot! Saved! And the USF Ice Bulls are going to the conference championship! Unbelievable play! USF wins it 5-4!
A little bit of excitement there, I think it would be fair to say. The USF men's Ice Bulls are in St. Louis this week for the American College Hockey Association Division III National Championship Tournament. Tonight they take on their arch rivals, the University of Tampa Spartans. It's a bit of an underdog story. They had to scrape together money for travel, accommodation, and ice time. And to tell us more, here's WSF intern Ricardo Cuomo, who's been reporting on the fortunes of the men's Ice Bulls. Thank you for being with us, Ricardo.
Thank you for having me, Matt.
And Cameron Chirillo, who calls the Ice Bulls games. I hope I'm getting your title right there, Cameron.
Yep, I'm the play-by-play guy for USF, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And if you're a collegiate hockey fan, maybe you're rooting for the men's Ice Bulls, you can join the conversation by calling 813-755-6562 or emailing floridamatters@wusf.org. Ricardo, ice hockey's not cheap, right? So let's just hear a little bit from one of the players you talked to. It's Jackson Keller.
Our budget was about $150,000, and the school was only able to give us like $10,000.
All right, so that's a bit of a deficit there for the club to make up. What are they spending the money on? Why does it cost so much?
Yeah, I think Cameron could give you a better answer than me because he's been around the players a lot more. But, all the gear that they get, they have to pay for that out of pocket. Travel, they have to go out of state even for the games. Right now they're in St. Louis, so they have to pay for their flight expenses, for their hotels. They have to pay for all of that out of pocket, and as well as ice time. They practice at a public rink 20 minutes away, and they have to pay to reserve that rink.
Sure.
So all of that comes out of their own pockets.
Yeah. Aside from that $10,000 from the university. All right. So Cameron, yeah, what about that? What are you kind of hearing on the financial side from the club?
Yeah, I mean, it's all about everything that encompasses what hockey is about. I mean, you got to pay for your skates, you got to pay for your pads, you got to pay for your sticks. It's all relative, and just like Ricky said, sometimes we travel out of state to play opponents. Like during the middle of October, USF actually traveled to South Carolina to play the Clemson Tigers. It was about a 10 or 11 hour drive. I was speaking to the goalie, Ryan Koch, about it, and he told me that the drive back was even longer just because that they were coming back, I believe, Monday. So they hit a bunch of that Monday traffic. And yeah, but for USF, we typically try to keep most of our opponents not necessarily local to Tampa Bay, because we do play teams like UTampa, but we play a bunch of Florida schools like Miami, Florida Southern, and schools like that. But it's all about just everything that encompasses like buying your own gear. And since we're a club team, we don't have anybody to pay for like a bus or a plane. So typically what the players do is they carpool. I myself drove to Fort Myers when USF played Florida Gulf Coast during the regular season in October, and I had to pay out of my own pocket for that as well. So it's expensive because we're not treated like a Division I hockey program like Michigan or Boston College. We just we have what we have, and we try to work with it.
I guess the flip side of that is the team, it sounds like you're spending a lot of time together, whether it's on the road. Like, it must be a pretty tight-knit unit.
Yeah, there's a lot of camaraderie with the team. I've grown really close with those guys. I also just like to keep track of their stats as well. I mean, not only are we close, on the ice and off the ice in terms of, people, but I like to look at things from the analytical sense as well. I have our stats sheet pulled up, and one of our top players, Grant Dietz, leads the team in goals, points scored, and believe it or not, penalty minutes. He has 112 penalty minutes. So basically 2 hours that he spent in the penalty box. So that just shows the grit of this kid. But talking about Dietz, it's not a surprise because he played up in the North American League. He's from Illinois, so he's been surrounded by ice hockey his entire life.
Yeah, okay, and he's bringing those skills to Tampa. Actually, we've got a bit of sound from Grant Dietz. Let's just take a listen.
If I was injured for the rest of my career, I'd do anything I could to be around the club in some way, shape, or form. Like, that's how great of a group it is.
All right, I think that sort of speaks a little bit to the camaraderie, as Cameron was saying. Now, I understand there's been a bit of a funding boost since your reporting came out, Ricardo. People are paying attention to the Ice Bulls, and that's helping them along a little bit.
Yeah, so I've heard they had a GoFundMe. Their goal before the story went out was $6,000, and now they're up to $7,500. They hit that goal, and their goal is now at $9,000. So the GoFundMe is still open, even though they're in St. Louis right now. And I'm guessing they can take all the support they can. I mean, flying over there and staying, it's not a cheap thing.
Yeah. What about that competition then? I mean, was that sort of a surprise to see them go that far and get into that national championship?
I don't think so. Because last year they also made the conference championship. They lost to Middle Tennessee State. But this year, as one of the players told me, they were just trying to make a run back for it, and they won the championship against their rival, coincidentally, and now they're making a run for the Nationals. And they were in the Nationals last year too. They made it pretty far, but couldn't bring it home, unfortunately.
Is there like a kind of a level at which they would have to be playing to kind of get up to the next level where they can maybe get a little more money from the university? Like, do you know how that works?
I don't really know how that works, but what they told me is that they sent in a budget with all the expenses that they anticipate to have for this year and the expenses they had for the previous season, and the university allocates them a funding or a budget for those expenses. And last year, like Jackson Keller said, they got 10,000 from the university. So, and that's a minimal percentage of what their actual budget was, which was 150,000.
Mm-hmm. We're talking about the USF men's ice hockey team, the Ice Bulls. They're up in St. Louis for the national championship right now. If you've got some thoughts about ice hockey at USF, maybe just ice hockey in general, give us a call, 813-755-6562. Maybe you're rooting for the Bulls, hoping to see them do well in that championship. The number again, 813-755-6562. You can also email FloridaMatters at WUSF.org. Cameron, so talk about this kind of rivalry with University of Tampa. So that's the first game of this competition, right? They're playing them tonight. What are you expecting to see there?
Well, USF and UTampa, to put it simply, do not like each other. I mean, the two schools are separated by no more than 30 minutes. A little known fact, Ricardo actually mentioned that USF plays at a off-campus arena about 20 minutes from campus. UTampa actually does the same. So USF plays their home games at Advent Health Center Ice in Wesley Chapel, and UTampa plays their home games at the Clearwater Ice Arena in Clearwater. Mm-hmm. So technically, both Tampa schools don't really play in the city of Tampa for their home games. They're in the Tampa Bay area, obviously, but it's interesting that neither team plays in Tampa initially. But UTampa and USF have actually played 6 total times in the regular season. They're going to be playing for a 7th time today for the first round of the pool play.
Mm-hmm. So they know each other pretty well, it sounds like.
Very much so. And a lot of those guys played together as well back in the past. I know one of our forwards, Jack Flair-Wilsey, actually played travel hockey with one of the defensemen for UTampa, Trace Cowart. So those two are actually pretty good friends off the ice as well. Mm-hmm. But there's a lot of tripping that goes on. There's a lot of talking. UTampa and USF, it's like two Goliaths going at it. And the cool thing about it, me being the play-by-play guy for USF, is I've got to call pretty much all of the games, all the home games, obviously. The first time we played UTampa was Halloween night, ironically, in Clearwater. USF took the win 6-2. The next day was a home game for us, so USF and UTampa played in Wesley Chapel. USF won that game 9-5. Then the third time that they played was actually the only time that UTampa actually beat USF.
Huh.
It took them to get a shootout to beat us, but that sometimes you get lucky. UTampa won that game 4-3 in a shootout. And then we ended up playing them 2 more times. We played them Saturday for senior night, February 7th. We beat them 10-5. That was an exhilarating match. And then Sunday, we went back to Clearwater to play them again, and we beat them 9-3.
Oh, wow.
So these two teams know each other very well. And then you bring up the tournament. USF was the 2 seed, and they had to bye into the quarterfinals. And UTampa was the 5 seed, so they just finished outside of the top 5 because the University of South Carolina took that 4th spot. But what UTampa had to do is they had to play a qualifying game and then play the regular game. So they had to play 4 total games as a whole.
Right.
So how it went for USF and UTampa to get to where they were. USF obviously had the bye. They would take on the winner of the Kennesaw State-Tennessee game. Tennessee lost to Kennesaw State 6-2, and then Kennesaw State played USF. USF won that game 12-5. So something to note about this USF team is that they score a lot of goals.
Yeah, it does sound like a lot of goals. All right, so a lot to watch out for tonight, no doubt. Now, I want to just change gears a little bit before we let you go. Ricardo, you're also following the fortunes of the USF men's basketball team. They're in the NCAA tournament. Why is this significant?
Well, it's especially significant for head coach Brian Hodson.
Mm-hmm.
He was born and raised in Western New York, and they're playing their first round game against the Louisville Cardinals in Buffalo. So his father, Larry, he has dementia and has never seen him head coach a game before. So the town where he's from, it's about an hour and a half drive from Buffalo. So he's going to be there, and he's going to see him. I talked to Coach Hodson. I was at a press conference, and he said that it's really special for him. It's really special to have his dad there for him and see him coach a game.
Yeah, all right. And I think this is the first NCAA tournament in 14 years for the USF men's basketball team, so quite a lot riding on this as well. I'm going to have to leave the conversation there, but we've been talking with WUSF intern Ricardo Cuomo about USF men's hockey and a little bit of basketball as well, and commentator Cameron Trilla about the team. Cameron, thanks so much for joining us, and Ricardo, thank you as well.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It was a great time.
And you can read more of Ricardo's reporting and see photos on WSF.org. The Ice Balls face their arch rivals, the University of Tampa Spartans in St. Louis tonight. It's their first game in the American College Hockey Association Division III National Championship Tournament. Well, tomorrow on Florida Matters, live and local, lawmakers in Washington are debating a voting overhaul bill. And Florida's just passed their own version. It's a law requiring proof of citizenship to vote. What do you think? Do we need stricter rules about voting, or is it going to cause some problems for legitimate voters? Give us a call, 813-755-6562. You can leave a message there. Also email FloridaMatters@WSF.org. Join the conversation Thursday at noon. That's our show for today. Our executive producer is Grayson Doctor. Our producers are Amelie Horace and Quincy Walters. Engineers Jackson Harp and Gio Garvin. Jackson composed our theme music. Natalie Jaron handled the video today. And you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and watch on WSF's YouTube channel. I'm Matthew Petty. Thanks so much for listening and watching.